Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to move up to English right now because I think everything will be held in English, isn't it, guys? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, please a very warm welcome to Rondes and to Stephen here on stage. Welcome on board. Jump on stage, yeah. Fireworks, no dancers, no, but it's okay. We are very glad to have you here. Most of IMA already knows you because you are also superstar in the AI Gora. But now, guys, what are you gonna explain us this morning? Who's gonna start? Allez, Rand, you travel from far. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, a lot of topics that have been discussed over the last 2 days here and around AI. And we will be sharing really a perspective between what's going on in the United States and what's going on in China. So kind of a comparative of development, and it will result in the conversation around where do we go from here.
So, as you could guess, I'm representing China. He represents the United States. So what we want to show a couple of different topics. If you want to ask a question, you can. It's no problem. We'll speak about what's happening in the space, in AI, in energy, and data centers, comparing both countries. And what we decided, we split every slide on the left side, China, on the right side, America. So I will start with the first one, give you some idea of what's happening in China. So in AI, you have plenty of models. Most of them are not very well known in Europe, except DeepSeek. But if you go to China at the moment, DeepSeek is considered as really outdated because you get much more powerful LLM or RLM in China. And the way China apprehended AI is really through open source. So most of them are open source. And they focus per verticals. So you get AI dedicated to finance, AI dedicated to legal, to medicine, to anything. And during the AI Agora, I will present most of the startups that exist in China. Now, the latest one in China is Meituan. Meituan is the Uber Eats from China, who arrived with a powerful AI system, and I used to deal with lots of data. One thing that I did just for her, now in China you get a robot that is dealing with the traffic and AI, so they don't use police or gendarme anymore. They use AI and robots to deal with the traffic in Hangzhou. The latest autonomous car in China, this one, it's a level 4, so you don't need to touch the wheel, and it can go in the river. And then the latest in robots, there are two different things, and you will have the slides after, but you can watch the video. The latest robot can do really kung fu, real kung fu. So the ability in 1 year move from look like a human to a real human, and that's the sword dance from kung fu. And this one is solving one of the biggest issues that China got at the moment. They don't make any children. So the latest one, they start to open schools for robots. And this is one of the schools of Beijing to teach to robots how to deal with the daily task. So to serve coffee, to deal with orange juice and everything, to train them, then to take care of older people, to solve the problem of having no children. So that's the new. It appeared this year. Last year they had already a school for robots, but it was more for the industry. Now they have schools for robots for B2C customers.
In the United States, it's been a large development of AI for the last several years. Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, a number of the organizations keep building technologies around AI. Some of the latest models seem like they come out every 2 weeks. When I created this slide a month ago, GPT 4.1 was the latest, and now GPT, or 5.1, and now 5.4 is the latest model. And by the time this gets posted up on the website, it'll be the next revision. The technology moves quickly. And a lot of these organizations like Google and Microsoft and Oracle and IBM were early to develop because they had the data center capacity. And that's where America has a huge advantage, is that they have data centers, and that's one of the topics and slides, of developing large systems in large scale. There's a lot of extensions of things like OpenClaw that were developed here in Europe that is now being used in the United States to be able to develop AI and expand. So US innovation is has a head start because a lot of the capacity, but also a lot of the innovation that's built out. On my way to the airport yesterday, I took a cab. It was a Waymo, picked me up, no driver, it was completely driverless. It was over 50 kilometers that drove me from my home to the airport, no driver. On the freeways, on the roads, dropped me off at the airport. So autonomous vehicles are very commonplace in Silicon Valley and San Francisco where I live. We have a number of different technologies that are coming around robotics. We work with a number of companies in manufacturing that are using robots to be able to do more than manufacturing vehicles for the last 20 years. We've had robots create cars, create manufacturing goods. What we're seeing today are, in a lot of the manufacturing facilities, autonomous robots that are looking at defects, picking out bad goods, throwing them away, identifying when the line is slowing down, or when goods are being manufactured, how does it go through and replace defective equipment or defective parts automatically. So we're seeing a huge advancement. I'll talk a little bit more about that in future slides.
So here, to give you an idea of data centers in China. Of course, China got far less data centers than the United States. It's about 440, or 449 to be precise, in China, but a strong increase of the number of data centers. And so you get the terabyte that are needed in China and the increase of terabytes. So you see one of the big issue of data centers, but it's everywhere in the world, it's electricity. And in another slide, we'll show the difference of political difference between United States and China regarding how to produce electricity. China has decided to use nuclear factories. At the moment, they are building 120 new reactors and 1,200 coal factories. Yeah, I know in France we are building maybe one. That's a big difference. And the second part, they are thinking to build a nuclear factory on the moon, and we will see in later slide why. But the idea regarding data centers is first to put under the water. So south of China, you have one full data center that is inside the ocean for cooling. It's working perfectly. Now they are sending one data center in orbit, in low orbit. And this one, people would ask why you do this. And the reason is very military. The data center is collecting all the data from military satellites, processing the data in the space, and then sending back the result to us, avoiding interception in between. The biggest problem they face doing this is the energy cannot be eliminated in the space. There is no wind. That's one of the issues. And the latest data center they want to put will be on the moon, but we'll come back to this one later.
So in the United States, by far, number 5,381 data centers, both in the United States as well as US companies having data centers abroad. So these are companies like Microsoft and Google and AWS, Amazon, and Oracle, number of data centers. There's construction right now with over 16 gigawatts of new capacity, 140 projects just starting this year alone. So hundreds and thousands of different centers. In the United States, most of the data centers have either been on the West Coast, Los Angeles or San Francisco, or on the East Coast, Boston or New York. In the middle of the United States, a number of data centers are being built up in states like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. So data centers now throughout the United States. There's a US government investment, what they call Genesis mission. And in this mission, and there's been a lot of talk in the last year or two about United States and AI, but this is really the clarity of what Genesis mission is. It's an action plan of innovation and infrastructure, building the systems to create it. The USAI Gov, which is the secure government artificial intelligence. The AI Training Act, which is a literacy program for government employees, as well as those going through lower education, K through 12 education in the United States to teach AI to students. So a number of different things that are going on throughout the United States in the development of AI for data centers as well as for literacy of people.
I just remark on your map. Yeah, China got 449, but Hong Kong got 122. which is part of China, by the way. So here, one is the main issue, and it's the race to space. China, as you know, got orbital station, and that's the only one that will remain very soon because the one that we share with American will disappear very quickly. They have lots of different rockets. They are thinking, and it has been validated, to send 200,000 satellites in orbits, low orbits. To give you an idea, Elon Musk just reached 10,000. So here we signed for 200,000. One of the main targets of China is to land on the moon by 2029. So we'll see the first mission going to the moon starting from next year, not uninhabited. And then in 2029, they want to land on the moon. And starting from 35, they want to use the moon as a ground for rare metals, so to extract minerals from the moon. So they need a station. And to do the station, that's what I was mentioning before, why they want to put a nuclear reactor on the moon, it's to bring the electricity to the station on the moon. So they are thinking to build a nuclear reactor by 2035 on the moon. Don't ask me what they will do with the uranium, I have no idea. And then in terms of orbit, so you have lots of satellites, they have their own GPS, but now they are dealing with, from Earth to orbit, with laser. They reach 120 gigabits per second on a laser beam, which is way over what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink. So the new technology, and that will be extended everywhere in the world. So you could choose either American technology or Chinese technology. And of course, their target is to cover LATAM and Africa.
In the way of technologies, the key to AI is communications, data, information in and out. And as Stefan talked about, being able to create data centers on the moon, Starlink, Elon Musk's Starlink, has many satellites that are doing communications. One of the things that's being developed right now is what they call direct-to-phone communications, where we're going to be able to use our mobile phones, but the connectivity is going to be through satellite-based systems, directly to our phone system. So beyond just internet, to be able to do 4G, text messaging, and communications with satellite-based systems. And this is not very far away. This is within the next 6 to 12 months that we're going to have the ability that our mobile phones are going to be able to talk to satellites directly. When we look at, and this is something that I'll talk about in the upcoming slide here, is around in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. And this is one of the biggest challenges of, even though we might put nuclear power plants on the moon or data centers in the sky or even data centers on the ground or under the water, how do you maintain them? How do you support them? So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the slide. But what we have found, and as we've seen over the last 2-3 years, SpaceX and their autonomous spacecraft. When a few people were stranded on the International Space Station, is that SpaceX sent a rocket up, docked, no humans inside of it, pulled astronauts into the rocket and flew them home. And so that technology of fully autonomous, just like I can take a cab, a taxi cab, from my home to the airport, we can now take a taxi cab through SpaceX up into the sky and back. And that becomes the key piece in making this ability to service, maintain, and support sky-based data centers, electricity systems, things of that type into the future.
Just to add something, what you said about United States. Now, if you take an Air France flight, everywhere, you got Starlink, you got 400 megabit on your phone for free, which was very surprising to me. But now everyone will do Teams in the plane. So one element here is very important. To understand the evolution of a country, you have to look at, one of the factors is to look at energy. And if you look at the curves here, you see basically the consumption or the production. It's energy consumption here. United States, more or less flat. It has a peak in the 70s at the petrol crisis, the one of the 70s. The French one, more or less, now is flat. It decreased a little bit because we make efforts on energy. If you look at the Chinese one, and you can see really when China started to develop, the year 2000. Now, the Chinese electricity consumption per habitant is about the same as France. So China is not a third world country, it's a developed country. And this is a good indicator of where they will go, and the target will increase because they are developing data centers. So this is just an indicator for you to know where China is standing. So if you look at the energy, we get two different models between China and America. In China, a big part was coal, and of course it has pollution. But as always in China, they have a good way to solve pollution. The coal was east side of Beijing, and they had the Olympic Games. They could not manage to have pollution in Beijing. So they moved the factories to west side of Beijing, because the wind is pushing to the Uyghur. And they solved the pollution of Beijing. Now they are developing nuclear factories. So as I mentioned, a big part is nuclear. And the biggest solar farms in the world are in the Gobi Desert, which is a very impressive technology because it produces enough electricity for a country like Luxembourg with one farm. And the problem of having solar panel in the desert, and I think it's one of the only countries in the world that manage it with Saudi Arabia, you got the sound that is going to the solar panel. So you have a big problem of impact of the sound scratch on the solar panels, plus the sound accumulating. So there are drones all the time cleaning up the solar panels. And they are thinking to build new factories in the very near future. So this one is already 6 billion kilowatts of electricity, with the biggest one in the Gobi Desert.
So as the previous slide that Stefan showed about energy, the United States has a large demand and capacity to create it, and there's adding more, $265 billion in investment this year alone in infrastructure. But the appetite is double that. So as much as there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of capacity, in order for us to be able to maintain the level of usage in AI, it needs to be twice that amount. Now, in the United States, there's been a very low usage of nuclear power. And there's a lot of social reasons that people within the United States don't want nuclear power plants. However, for the first time in 30 years, there's been an expansion of public and private investment in nuclear development. And so that will hopefully be able to satisfy America's appetite in energy creation and develop. One of the comments by the United States President Trump was that he's going to make US businesses, AI businesses, be responsible for energy. Like a lot of things that President Trump says, he says it before he thinks about it, so we don't know what that really means, because we don't want AI companies like OpenAI or Microsoft developing nuclear power plants. So there's still some interest as to what does that really mean, but I think a lot of the profits that we might see in AI and cloud-based companies may flow into energy development. Still yet to be heard, and it's been 2 months since that speech from the president. We'll see what happens. He's a little occupied right now blowing up countries.
So looking ahead, this is a slide that we want to share our thought about what's the future of both countries. Of course, it's our analysis. First, Chinese got a huge problem. They don't make any children, and it has a couple of reasons. Because first, it's very expensive. Then in China, traditionally speaking, you take care of your parents. So most people cannot deal taking care of the parents plus the children. So that's a huge problem. Does anyone have any idea what is the target of Chinese population by 2100, so 2100? At the moment that I put it? Oh yeah, sorry. So basically they will lose between 600 million and 800 million people in the next 75 years. At the moment, the population is decreasing only by 2 million per year. Japan got the same problem, Korea as well. So one of the things now, the second problem they have is the young generation. they are jobless. 40% of the young are jobless in China. And they decide to do, I don't want to be in the tech industry. I want to go back to manufacturing. I want to go back to traditional works. So even the young generation who has studied very hard doesn't want to work in the high-tech industry because they see what we say in China, the 996. You work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And they don't want to do this anymore. So what will be the future of China? Very difficult to think. Personally, I think that India will be ahead of China by 2060. And China will really decline because they don't make any children. That's the biggest issue. And of course, that's why they develop robots.
So in the way of AI models, the US will have challenges moving forward. They are very far ahead of a lot of different organizations creating models, but it's always harder being at the front of the race because everybody else knows how to catch up or learn from the mistakes and surpass. So the United States will, their advantage or their development will start flattening out, and that gives opportunities for other countries, other entities, sovereignties, to be able to develop a lot of these technologies. Also, the United States political and economic stature right now is challenging. It's where the politicians in America are making statements, but not necessarily supporting businesses. Or when we talk about data center growth, is that data center development, energy development is 1 year, 5 year, 20 years. But if a lot of these businesses can't understand what the president is going to tweet tomorrow morning and how that might affect long-term investments, a lot of these companies are holding back on development. So this, again, America, I think over the next year to 5 years, will be flat and not developing as quickly as it's done over the last 5 years, again, opening up a lot of opportunity. Specifically around underwater centers, and this is something that China has sunk their most recent project. Microsoft did this 4 years ago, Project Natick. And they pulled it out of the water because they found it was too expensive to upgrade and update. And as many of you know in the technology industry, new technology, new GPUs from NVIDIA come out, you need to pull that technology out and put new ones in. And with the underwater technology, Microsoft found it was too expensive to maintain those systems. So we'll see where China ends up with that, because a lot of the ideas of build, build, build is what China wants to be able to do. Even companies like Microsoft and Google, they were for the last 2-3 years building data centers. If they had 50, they'd build 100. If they had 100, they'd build 500. And they finally slowed down end of last year because they were building them faster than the capacity requirements, and so they weren't able to increase their profitability within that space. I talked about space and satellites, is that again, we can shoot satellites, we can create space centers, but how do we maintain and support those? And the big piece I identify is energy, is that the data that we have today is the future currency. It is our money. And in the future, when we start developing data systems and communication systems, we need to be able to have the energy to be able to support that. And again, in the United States, it's flat in the way of development of investments that needs to grow. So American companies will innovate. There's always this innovation of spending money, and they're far ahead of what's out there. But as I travel around the world and I speak to business executives, I always say there's a huge opportunity right now, because America is at a place right now where it's flatline and not growing, and that means that there's more opportunity to develop sovereign clouds and sovereign networks.
Very good job, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen and Ran. We still have 4 minutes for questions, guys, so don't hesitate. En régie, je vais demander à ce qu'on remette un petit peu la lumière pour qu'on puisse voir nos invités. Et puis, je vais déjà tranquillement demander à François de me rejoindre, même si c'est pour la séquence qui suit. Pardon ? Ok, allez, mesdames et messieurs, vos questions, vos réactions, vos critiques, vos états d'âme, non. Et le tout en 4 minutes chrono. Alors, par ordre, voilà. On va faire peut-être une première question. Il y a beaucoup de questions. Donc, inscrivez-vous au Business Café. Voilà.
Hello, Thomas Morin from Airbus Helicopters, but it's going to be a question from my nuclear past. Because you mentioned a nuclear reactor on the moon for the Chinese. I know that the US also mentioned similar plans. How do you get rid of the waste heat?
Quick answer, because we're going to have lots of questions and very few time.
What they're thinking at the moment is to put turbines that the generator will make work to push the heat. That's the only solution they find, because there's no wind on the moon. So, and there is no atmosphere. So at the moment, their biggest concern is how to dissipate. And honestly, I don't know.
Okay, Pascal,
They have the same problem with the satellite. Huh?
Yes. Pascal Durard, ST Micro. So, remark for you, Rand. You know, I guess you know who is doing the technology for SpaceX for the. Okay, so it's Europe. Europe is part of it. And Stefan, what is the reaction of Chinese government for the unemployment of the young people? Because 40% is huge, and for me, they are ahead of us. We may have the same in a couple of years.
Actually, the Chinese government got a couple of solutions, but it's always the first one. They stopped to publish the statistic, so the problem is solved. That was 3 years ago. The second one, they try to encourage companies by decreasing the tax, but they barely pay any tax anyway. And the third one, which is a long-term vision, try to develop the number of children. So it's not unemployment of today's children. They increase the tax on condoms and pills to oblige people to have children. So they try to have children and then increase the salaries. But still, after the COVID and the way China handled the COVID, the young generation doesn't want to work in big cities. So one of the things they should look at is how to develop factories in smaller cities, so tier 3, for example.
Yes, short answer, because we have many questions.
Thank you, Stefan and Rand. I'm Emmanuel Kunz from the French government, well, some agency. Stefan has put a lot of stress on China's demographic problems. Rand, what's your take about the United States? Do you have the same problems, or do you rely on bringing people in the States, such as AI?
Well, that becomes, again, a political problem that's creating an economic challenge, is that the President of the United States has blocked all immigration, and nobody wants to come to the United States, and I don't blame them. It's not a safe place, I think, for a lot of people that don't live there. So there's a talent issue, because eventually the President's idea is train Americans to become factory workers and what have you, but it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to develop that. And so over the next 5 to 10 years, there's a lot of opportunity outside of the United States than inside.
Okay, last questions, very quick questions and quick answer here, if you can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your amazing presentation. Mohamed Wariagli from IMA. Just 2 quick questions. First one, I was surprised to do not see in one of your first slides, you did not mention the famous meilleures.im, which is the one who has been bought by Meta probably a few weeks or maybe a few months ago. My second question, and maybe it will be the conclusion and the joke. No word about Europe?
So I will. I can answer to both because I know both of them. So Menus AI, I spoke about this one about 1.5 years ago at the Iagora, and I said you should look at this company, and people didn't believe me exactly at that time. It has been purchased by Facebook, and now the latest news would be they will be forbidden to operate in China. But the Chinese government is not exactly in favor of this. But Manus AI is based in Singapore, so it's a little bit complex. But it's one of the best Chinese. Now the European one, as we focus mainly on America and China, that's why we didn't mention the European one. It was a choice, but we could have put it on the looking ahead for Europe, so Mistral, for example, or others. But it was a choice to focus only on American and Chinese. That's why we didn't mention.
Rand, something to add? Everything is okay?